The 2020 Democratic field wide open, we sat down with someone who knows a lot about vying for the party's nomination. Howard Dean ran for president during the 2004 election. The former Vermont governor has remained active in presidential politics ever since. Dean sat down with our CBSN political reporter Caitlin Huey-Burns to discuss all things 2020 and what candidates he'd like to see at the top of the ticket.
I like young candidates. Our party, our base in our party is women, people of color, and young people under 35 or 40. They vote overwhelmingly for Democrats. We have to get them to turn out. So I think you're going to see a really different Democratic Party. I would be shocked if you saw two white guys at the top of our ticket this time, because in the last two elections, in 2017, 2018, the people who won look like the American people. And we have to keep doing that. So, you know, whoever we choose, I think it'll be a really interesting ticket.
So you're advocating for a younger, fresher face. Joe Biden is 77. Should he run? He
should do whatever he wants. I've stopped advocating for anything because I can't, because I'm supposed to be neutral. So, you know, my past words I don't change, but going forward, whoever wins the nomination is who I'm for.
So Bernie Sanders, a fellow Vermonter, is also in the race, his second time running. What do you make of his campaign?
I think he's going to have a harder time this year because there's so many more candidates. It's a different kind of race. But he obviously has a huge database. I mean, he's raised $6 million in the first 2 days or something like that, which is pretty extraordinary.
I mean, a lot of these candidates are really focusing on small dollar grassroots donation. You were kind of a pioneer of that back in 2004 when you ran. What are some, benefits to focusing on these donations? You're seeing a lot of candidates disavow corporate PAC money. Yep. And what are some liabilities? I mean, can you actually run a campaign just on grassroots donations?
You certainly can, and we should if we can. Look, one of the biggest issues in the campaign is going to be the corruption of American politics by large corporations. We don't have to all be anti-capitalism, but capitalism is broken right now. Capitalism has to work for everybody, and it doesn't. And smart business people will tell you that. And so if we don't fix the system as we had to do in the 1930s, then our country's going to collapse. So you're going to see a lot of things that bring. This is not a matter of moving the party to the left. It's about making America strong again so everybody can participate. So you are going to see Medicare for all. Now, there's different ways of doing Medicare for all and smart ways of doing it. You're going to see a better way to get college. There's lots of ways to do quote-unquote free college. And people are going to debate how you're going to do it, but they're not going to debate whether you should do it or not.
Trump has already kind of seized on a lot of these candidates pushing for more progressive policies. You mentioned Medicare for all. The Green New Deal, obviously, is being talked about a lot by a lot of these candidates, some of them endorsing the proposal by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And the president is trying to paint all these Democrats as socialists or moving too far to the left. Do you think there's any opening for him to have a point? I mean, how should these candidates handle?
I don't think he has a single opening. First of all, this is a corrupt man who's the head of the country, and people don't like that. I don't care where you are in the political spectrum. There are plenty of conservatives that are sick of Donald Trump. Second of all, the base of the Republican Party is old. They think socialism is awful. The young people don't, because they've never were around when authoritarianism and socialism were mixed together under the Russians or the Chinese. And so when they were a threat to the United States, now the Russians are becoming a threat again. But so this is basically red baiting, and red baiting is not going to work in 2020.
But on this issue of socialism, I mean, Bernie Sanders calls himself a democratic socialist, but not all the candidates are trying to embrace that term. What does the term socialist mean to Democrats these days?
That's a damn good question. I have no idea. Look, if socialist means we ought to have Medicare, everybody ought to have health insurance in the country, I'm a socialist, and nobody's ever accused me of that before because I'm conservative about money, and everybody knows that. We have to have a basic state where the product of the work of the American people is shared more equally by all of us. That means everybody has to have health care. We ought to get rid of student debt. And we could, instead of Donald Trump giving tax cuts to his billionaire friends, we could have reduced the debt for the same amount of money of all students. They would have had to spend the money and stimulate the economy. The billionaire friends of Donald Trump didn't do any of that. They just did stock buybacks and bought big yachts. I mean, the country is upside down with the worst leadership probably in the history of the country. and we got to do better, and we will do better. We will not do it better by attacking Donald Trump all the time. Let him attack himself. He does that well. Let us talk about what we're going to do to make the country a better place.
And Caitlin Huey-Burns joins me now. So, Caitlin, Howard Dean talks about Democrats needing younger, more diverse presidential candidates. What does that actually mean for the party's strategy here moving into 2020?
Well, the party's strategy has been to be very hands-off. They kind of learned all these lessons from 2016, and they're saying, look, whoever wants to run, run. They do have basic credentials to get into the debates, but it's a pretty low bar, and they're very much focused on this grassroots energy. So Howard Dean is now running a data collection, data sharing voter program with the DNC and state parties. So he's saying that he's trying to remain neutral. But if you read into what he's saying, he is kind of eliminating some people or suggesting some eliminations for people. I asked him about Joe Biden, for example, who is not young and who is not a member of the diverse coalition that Democrats have been building. And he said he didn't want to go there in that interview. But he is advocating for younger candidates. And he's also saying, look, we just had an election in which, Democrats won 40 seats and mostly through women, and they show a diverse coalition in Congress right now. So let's do more of that is basically what he was advocating for.
So as we heard, Dean pushed back on the notion that the party is moving too far to the left. But what advice did he have for candidates campaigning on those kinds of issues that at one time were considered radical, but are now considered, perhaps more mainstream, progressive ideals, things like Medicare for All and the Green New Deal?
Right, and Dean has been advocating for expanded health care for quite some time now. He was saying that, look, this is a good thing for the party to be pushing, but they have to be careful about how they're talking about it. And you've seen instances where there have been openings for Donald Trump and Republicans to go after Democrats on some of these issues, and their strategy is to paint Democrats as socialists. And I asked Howard Dean about that. You saw in that clip. He was basically saying, look, you want to show that you're supportive of things like Medicare for All and the Green New Deal, but you also have to be open-minded to how we get there. So he was saying that the Green New Deal at this point is just a proposal. It's a 4-page plan at this point. So you can advocate for the principles in it, but talk about how you believe that you can realistically get to some of these goals outlined or goals that you want to outline for yourself. And same with healthcare. So the basic principles are good, but just be more strategic about how you message this to people.
And Caitlin, you mentioned this a moment ago, but Dean is going to be running an operation by the DNC to collect and share voter data. And you asked him about when the committee was very publicly hacked during the 2016 election. Let's listen to that exchange.
In 2016, the DNC was hacked.
Right.
Can you guarantee that Democrats are ready for 2020?
I can guarantee you we're not ready, and we better get ready, because if we're going to do this, now we've learned some very bitter lessons because of being hacked in 2016, so we're better off than we were. But the hacking war, especially with the Russians, is going to get worse and worse. They're going to up their capabilities, and we're going to have to up ours.
I mean, should Dean's comments be troubling here for Democrats?
Well, Democrats are still feeling the burden of that hack in 2016, and so they are keenly aware of the challenges here. But what Dean was saying should really raise even more alarm bells within the party, because he also said that when it comes to this data sharing program that the Democrats are trying to initiate this time around, they're trying to keep up with Republicans who have been coordinating on data collection and sharing and security for quite some time. So they have even more ground to make up there.
Well, finally, let's listen to the very last question that you asked Dean about 2020 and messaging.
I know that you say that you can't endorse a candidate throughout this primary process, but is there a singular figure that you think at this point in time, whether a candidate or a member of Congress or someone outside, that best represents what the Democratic Party is? Who's the leader of the party?
There is none. There never is until we have a nominee. That's something everybody always asks. Democratic voters ask, news people ask that question. Why don't we have a message? The only message that we have until we have a nominee is "We're not Trump," which is right now an incredibly powerful message.
All right, Caitlin, what do you make of that message, that this campaign notion of "we're not Trump" might be strong enough at this point?
Well, it's strong enough in a Democratic primary at this stage because it is something that really energizes the base of the party. And those are the types of people that you need to get to turn out in these primaries. And we've talked about this before, that voters are very eager to find someone who can defeat Donald Trump in the election, but they have different views on how to get there. Is it a candidate who opposes Donald Trump, goes toe-to-toe and invokes his same style? Is it someone who draws a contrast on policy or personality? That all remains to be seen. But what Dean was saying there was that, presidential politics are about showing a vision for the country. And while Trump certainly is kind of the best organizer and unifier for Democrats, he's kind of saying that that can't only be enough at this stage, that they have to offer a vision. And we're going to see how that plays out and how all these candidates are so different from each other. Speaking about similar policies, those nuances will be very interesting to pay attention to.
It's a very crowded field.
It is,
really
growing by the day.
Growing by the
literally.
second, it feels like. All right, Caitlin Huey-Burns, really interesting conversation. Thanks so much.